Hi, everyone. It's good to see you again today, and I'm happy to present with you Lawrence Urban. He's an author extraordinary. He works with me on the anthologies and is part of Transcendent Authors. His primary area is thriller and horror, and sometimes a mixture of the two with a dash of comedy thrown in. So, Lawrence, tell me how you got started.
Writing in general, my mother was a reader, and she bought my sister a typewriter. I have a
Ah,
sister who's 2 years older than me. So when she started like seventh or eighth grade, she had to start doing papers. My mother bought a typewriter. Well, there it sat, and I had to use it because you don't have to use your pencil. You could just type it out, and there's the letters appear on the page. It was great. I just loved it. And I would go to a movie. And if I was satisfied with the ending or not, if I was unsatisfied, I would come home and rewrite the ending on that movie because it was more satisfying to me that way. So that's really how I got started. And then,
how old were you?
let's see, my sister I was probably about 10 or 11, something like that. And so that's how I started. And then I really didn't do much except read detective books for the next 10 years or so. And then I just got the urge to start writing stories, and I did it. They were detective, well, not really detective stories, murder mysteries. What I thought was a mystery, anyway. And that's how I started. Actually, some of it based on not that I was involved in murder, but events that happened in my life took on uh, plots for novels or books, and I would write about those. Not that it wasn't all true, of course. None of it is,
Hmm.
but and that's how I started. I just thought it'd be a good story if it ended this way instead of the way it actually ended. And so that's how I got started.
Which author would you say influenced you the most?
Oh, well, way back when, Richard S. Prather was a had detective stories he wrote, and that's the one I first got interested in. And he had his detective was named Shel Scott. There may be some people remember him, and maybe not. I don't know. And because this was quite a few years ago, and I started like I wanted to write those kind of stories, the the kind you see in the noir movies
Hmm.
and the
Yeah.
hard-boiled detective kind of thing. And but I'm not naturally a hard-boiled writer, so I had to throw comedy in with it, and that was pleasing to me. So that's how I did it. Stephen King was also a big influence. I hated him. I couldn't stop reading his books. It was most books end, they have a satisfying conclusion to the books. That the evil person is destroyed. Stephen King, he's got an evil person at the beginning of the book, and when the book ends, that guy's still there. So,
Oh,
and
oh,
it was
wow.
yeah. The clown in the sewer, he never got killed. He's still there. And
I don't think I could handle that. There is a reason I don't read his work.
oh well, I read the first one I ever read was Salem's Lot. It was about vampires.
Hmm.
And it's midnight. I'm sitting alone in my living room reading these vampire books. And I was living in Puerto Rico at the time. And since it's always warm there, your washer and dryer is set outside. And there's like a roof over top of the thing so it doesn't get rained on. And I'm reading the book, and in the book, a vampire can't get you unless you invite him in. So so I'm sitting there reading this, and my dryer goes off outside and starts buzzing. Now I don't want to go outside because the vampire's out there. So I went to the door and I kept my foot held the door open with my foot, so I would be technically still in the house, and he could, and the vampire couldn't get me, so I shut the dryer off. He's a good writer. He puts you right into it. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't deal with horror, but my husband was telling me when he was stationed in Greece on a small military installation, typhoon came in and he was in the back end of a truck with a cab over, and the wind was picking it up and bringing it
Oh
down.
no.
And he was reading Rosemary's Baby.
Oh shoot.
He was like, oh, never again. Never read something like that situation again.
I remember you told me you didn't like those kind of books because they gave you
Yeah,
nightmares.
yeah.
Because the
Months
first,
or years later, not right away. It
oh,
it's later on, all of a sudden they'll surface. And so I just don't even, if he wants to watch horror or when the kids were at home and they wanted to watch horror, they watched it when mom wasn't around because I didn't want to circumvent them from enjoying something.
right.
I
Yeah,
like
I don't think.
I like certain thrillers and I love mysteries. I love detective stories and things like that. Both my husband and I do. Um, and that's why I always wonder why you went into the detective genre and mystery and thriller. Well, now I know.
Well, the first book we wrote, first one I was involved with Transcendent Authors, was the Autumn book.
Mm-hmm.
And I sent in the first story. I didn't know any of y'all, the writers in there. And one of them was a horror story. And you told me, your thing was, I can't read this. And I thought, oh, shoot, I made a mistake. And then I understand that you can't read them because you get, nightmares later on, months
Well,
later or years later.
but you see, yours are not as horrid and they're not as long, which really, when it's a short story, it's not the same as when you're watching a feature-length movie
Mhm.
or reading a full, 300-page novel.
Right.
That's a total different thing to your psyche because you get involved in a short story, but not to the extent that you do those. And that's where I can get trapped uh, in that. And yours always has somewhere a positive or like you said, the bad guy is not there anymore. It's
Yeah.
resolved. So I don't have to worry about the clown in the sewer.
Right. That's like, well, Stephen King thrives on that kind of thing, though.
Uh-huh. And that's good because there's people that like that.
Yeah, obviously.
Uh-huh.
He's one of the
What
biggest writers we have.
Yeah, absolutely. What is your plans for the future as far as your writing is concerned? Do you plan on writing a novel or several novels or a compilation or
I've got four completed novels, and I've got maybe three others in the works that I go back and forth to every once in a while. And it just seems like such an uphill climb to get them published. All the editing and everything you have to do. It's just so I write the stories and then I set them off to the side. I would like to see them in print, but I don't know if I really have the drive to get it done. You know what I mean?
I have some tips. I would recommend that number one, you let Yash look at them and just offer him a fee. See if you'll take it. There are people, I have a friend that is very inexpensive as a editor, and she's like Stephen King. She's a minimalist. So I have to make sure that she doesn't take all of the descriptives out because my my audience likes the descriptors. So um, it's just finding people who know and who are good, that are economical. Because Yash is a very good editor. He's more of a developmental editor because he knows what's lacking.
Yeah, I find his comments
Yeah,
very helpful. Yeah, he's great.
yeah. And even within our own group, Claire, um, myself, uh, and Yash, and who else would be really good? Jen would be somebody really good to look at them and just ask if they would go through them. All they need to be is double spaced, 1 inch margins around, and indented like you do for formatting for our, and then making sure that they use tracking.
Well, you'd want somebody that does who reads the genre that you're
Right.
writing in.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're not going to like it.
Mhm.
I entered a contest one time, and it was a detective story.
Uh-huh.
And one of the judges, the person who judged it, she sent back, she goes, you had to send in first 25 pages of the novel. I don't like detective stories, she said. But the story pulled me along, and I think you ought to have it set it in and published. So, I mean, what do you do with that? She doesn't like them, so she's not gonna tell me that I'm in first place or something like that. She just disregarded the whole thing. So you got to find somebody who likes what you're writing, and
Yeah.
if you
Well,
don't,
this I know somebody who writes and edits detective
oh, okay,
and or mystery, if you will. So we'll talk about that
yeah,
later.
sure.
And do you have any advice for somebody who is just beginning to write?
Oh, just write, just do it. Uh, I have a son, not Kevin, but the other one, who writes these really interesting stories, but they're not they're not the kind that you would get published because they're not edited correctly. But the stories themselves are really good, but he just doesn't stick to it. He just goes and does other things. So if a person wants to write, you got to sit down and do it. Just
Mm-hmm.
every chance you get, if you're interested in it and the story's still in your head, then sit down and just keep writing it. And that's the only advice I would give to anybody.
Okay.
And to or know what you're writing about.
Yes.
Read stories that you want to write. Read the kind of
Yeah.
stories that you want to write.
I
Just
know my friend, her name is Paula, that writes mysteries and detectives, or non-detective sleuths. She is an auxiliary police or sheriff, and she's, set up crime scenes and, cordoned them off and done stuff like that. So she can has an end with the detectives and that on the force if she's got questions.
oh,
So,
great.
uh, so that is sometimes a beneficial is to get into some kind of volunteer. I know that is affiliated with the police to help
Mhm.
with if you want a little bit more in-depth information. I was going to ask you another question. If if somebody came to you and said, I'm in my 70s. I'm too old to start, but I have all these stories. What would you tell them?
Well, they have to write them. If you got story, if it's in your head that you want to write a book or a novel or a short story or whatever, do it. You got to do it. What do you have to lose? If it's no good, yeah, write another one. See if that one might be better. Because the first one you write is probably not going to be a great. Although, I changed my mind on that. Maybe you could be great. You don't know. We've had authors who write stories and send them in. Stephen King sent in, I think that not, his first movie was Carrie, and he sent that one into like 27 publishers before finally somebody took it and decided to write it. And I think that was the first one he got published. I could be wrong, but and that got him started on his career then. And so that you got to do it. You just have to, if you want to write, then you'll do it.
I have another question for you. Earlier, you mentioned that life experiences you also have in your story or sometimes rolled into it. Do you ever just see something happening and it gives you an idea, or how else do you get your ideas for your stories?
Well, the one we're working on right now is our next book, Reverie, and I got the idea. I'm starting writing it. I don't know. I don't know if I'll finish it or not. It might start as something else, but it started with the song Stardust because
Mm.
we heard the word reverie. We came up with it. And I started thinking, well, I heard that before, specifically, and it was in the lyrics of the movie Stardust, or the song Stardust, and there's something about the melody haunts my reverie or something like that. And so I looked up the lyrics, and then it gave me an idea for the short story I'm writing. And
Oh,
well, another one, one story that I had published. I don't know if I should admit this or not, but I got it from Sherlock Holmes' story, The Red-Headed League, where the guy he's set off to do something, and the ulterior motive for the guys who were doing it was to break into a bank, use his office to dig a tunnel to the bank, and so that gave me an idea for a short story of not breaking into a bank, but of another outcome. And I get a lot of ideas for stories like that. Songs seem to stick in my head for some reason. I get a lot of ideas from songs, and and other stories that I've read I could put a twist on it or take it in a different direction. But that's the idea. The plot starts right there.
mhm.
Well, I don't know
I
if that's.
use, yeah,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I don't have
I was
anything
going
to
to
say.
say I use other stories that I've read, other novels, and I sometimes take like three or four of them and kind of blend them
Hmm.
um, to come up with a story. And I've never used music, but I've sat someplace and seen somebody do something, an interaction between two people, and that will trigger.
Well,
Or just thinking back over the different places I've been over the years. And I know you've moved around quite a bit. Uh, Remembering those things will bring out something too.
I'm working
So,
on a story that that originated when I lived in Puerto Rico, and I'm kind of expanding on it now. It's about a Nazi hunter, and and doesn't turn out the way he thinks it's going to turn out. But anyway, I got that from an idea in Puerto Rico when I lived there.
not the vampire idea.
No, no.
For those of you who are wondering why I mentioned that, he was telling me about an incident when he lived in Puerto Rico and he'd been reading a story by Stephen King about vampires.
Yeah, we talked about that a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So. Well, this has been a wonderful time and a pleasure talking with you, Lawrence. And I'm going to be leaving on the end screen information on how you can get more info on Lawrence and the other things that he has written and how to contact him. Thank you, everyone, for joining us again. And we will see you next time on Kathleen's Interviews. Bye.